Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dose of Desi. Today is April 9th, 2022, and this is our 8th episode of our podcast. We're well we're well into spring by now at this point, and if you live in the Washington D.C. area, you might have had a chance to see the cherry blossoms, or at least might have heard about them. Yeah, D.C. is back in full swing. There's tourists everywhere and all sorts of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, it's really cool to see, and it's just us this week again. But we're here. We wanted to discuss something that is very timely since it's occurring right now, actually. And that topic is Ramadan and Eid. But before we get started, please feel free to share your thoughts, comments, and questions in the chat box throughout the podcast, and we'll keep an eye on that as usual. So for this podcast, I will actually be interviewed by my fellow co-host Udit, and so that I can really share my experiences of Ramadan and Eid. So take it away.
All right. So let's start with, what is it? What is Ramadan?
Yeah. So, and by the way, we thought we'd get all festive with our, the backgrounds, and I forgot that I was wearing a green shirt, so we're just rolling with it, having
You're looking
fun.
very sparkly and interstellar or something.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So what is Ramadan? So basically, there's the lunar calendar, right? And there's different lunar calendars. So the lunar calendar that's I guess known as like the Islamic lunar calendar, one of the months, the 9th month of the calendar is actually Ramadan. So it's a month in the year, and it's a month in essence where people that follow Islam or Muslims tend to fast every day during the month from sunrise to sunset, and that means no food, no water, and so you wake up before sunrise and eat, and then after sunset you can eat, and we do that for a month. So that is kind of the very basics of what Ramadan is in essence.
You mentioned a few things in there that I want you to expand on if you know the answer. 9th month, what's the significance of the 9th month?
I don't know that there's a necessarily. So I guess the significance is more not necessarily that it's the 9th month, but it's the month where back in the time of Muhammad, peace be upon him. So if you're Muslim, you believe that he's one of the prophets. So during that time, there was a lot of like things going on. If he was revealed certain things from God, like certain verses of in our faith, that sort of thing. So it's meant as like it's an important time, I guess, spiritually for Muslims.
Gotcha. Yeah, I ask because I know. So I grew up in a Hindu family, but I consider myself spiritual, open-minded, and curious to learn more about all cultures and religions. But we also have certain things that occur based on the lunar calendar, so that's why I asked.
Yeah.
But that's interesting. So when did Ramadan begin? Like, could you give us like a rough estimate if you know of that?
Yeah. So I actually looked up the exact year because I didn't know the year, so I can give that. But it was during the time of Muhammad, peace upon him, at the time. So basically, it was 624 CE 80 is the year that it basically started. So it was around the time. Yeah. Kind of originated in the city of Medina in Saudi Arabia, and then from there sort of spread.
Right. Yeah. No, that's very interesting. And part of the reason that I'm asking all these questions or I'm interviewing you about this is because Ramadan is something that's celebrated by a large majority of the world, right? Quite a large amount of the world's population. So that's why I thought it'd be nice to like highlight Ramadan.
Yeah, it's like what 8 billion
is that what it is?
people is
Really? At one point, wow. And we have almost what, 8 billion people on the planet today? Almost. So you're talking roughly almost 20% of the population. No, is that's
like almost 20%. Almost 25.
25% of the population. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That's it's a big chunk of the world. Let's see. It says differences in length around the world. What is that referring to?
Yeah.
Do you know?
So let's kind of dive into this a little bit. So basically, so the way that it works, right, is before, on each day, before sunrise, you would, excuse me, get up and eat, and we call that seri, is what it's known as. But you kind of
seri.
Yeah.
Cool.
So you get up, eat food. I don't know that there's any specific, dishes or things that you eat. It's just, you'll just kind of eat food with your family, and you eat before sunrise.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you fast during the day until sunset. And then when sunset comes, it's called Iftar, is the meal that you have when you kind of break your fast. So we'll talk a bit more about that later. But there's, from sunrise to sunset, depending on where in the world you are, that length can vary. And also depending on the time of the year, because it's based on the lunar calendar, right? So sometimes Ramadan can be during the summer, sometimes it can be during the winter. So it can definitely be, more or less difficult to some extent, depending on the time of year, but also time of where you, or place in the world where you are, just because of the length. I actually, maybe this is a good time to share a little infographic that kind of shows lengths around the world, so people can kind of get a sense of what that looks like as well. So we found this online from Statista, and you can kind of see where, here New York City says, based on when this was in 2018, like a 16-hour fast. But there's some places up in like Oslo, Berlin, they go up to 18, 19 hours, like Melbourne, 11 and a half hours. So based on where you are and where the sun, from sunrise to sunset, that can change.
But why is New York City 16 hours? That's pretty... okay, Oslo is further up north, for example. Okay.
Yeah, so and it also depends on when. So in 2018, I guess this would have been more in the summer-ish time, because we're getting a little bit earlier every year. So right now, it's basically from like, I want to say like 5:30-ish a.m. to 7:30 p.m. So we're kind of in like a 14-hour-ish fast here on the East Coast in the U.S. So that's kind of where, how it can range.
Interesting.
Yeah, I looked this up as well, because I was thinking about folks in like out in like Alaska, right? Like the sun like never comes out. Like what do they do? So there's been some interesting use cases of folks like that are in places like that, where they've had to like consult like, religious scholars and stuff, and be like, how do we handle this? Because we can't obviously just not eat or drink for weeks.
I was gonna say, yeah.
So they've kind of come up with different like rules, or way, like maybe go and buy a nearby location or something. Or there was actually somebody, I think an astronaut, a Malaysian Muslim astronaut, who went up into space. And they're like, well, that's going to totally vary
all the time, every 90 minutes like, in the space station, right? Like
Exactly. So I think what they ended up doing is they looked at the location that the where they launched from up into space. Like they just went off of base of that time. So interesting use cases depending on like, where people are in the world, but that's how it can vary.
I just thought of another scenario, random, but what if like in Antarctica right now, right? Like it's the days are like super, I don't know if it's like nighttime there right now, like 6 months of night and 6 months of day, right? Like what if a Muslim scientist goes down there and it's like, oh my God, it's Ramadan, I have to observe this, and this is like, well, it's nighttime all the time, or like it's daytime all the time. So just thought of that. Like it's so interesting that I didn't even think of that when I thought about fasting initially until like, we started
Yeah.
talking about it. So things like
Yeah, it
that.
can definitely vary depending on where you are. So it's
Yeah.
interesting, those differences, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay, well, let's get into some other questions. Why is Ramadan celebrated or observed? Did you
So it's
mention that already?
considered, to some extent, yeah. I mean, it's considered one of like the main pillars of our faith. It's something, so beyond what I mentioned of like no eating or drinking, right? So
Mm-hmm.
the month of Ramadan is very like spiritual in the sense that, we also try and abstain from like partying and super, crazy entertainment and stuff. You try and focus, you know, um, on your faith, yourself, supporting people around you. It's a very like community driven month as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that you're encouraged to go and give charity, and
Right.
so it's kind of a month to really like you take a step back from life and just sort of refocus and get rid of like the worldly things, I guess, to some extent. And um, so
Like
that's
the
it's kind of
focus is
a
on your like spirituality, the religious aspect of it, community. It's like it almost sounds in a way like grounding yourself, right?
yeah, yeah, and that's kind of the point, is like it happens every year, so that as the year goes by, you're supposed to like develop good habits and really focus on
Mm-hmm.
things, so that they say, I forget how many days it takes to build a habit. It's like 20 something days, I think. A random Grogu
I was just gonna say,
effect.
Baby Yoda made an appearance. Like,
um, so it's like 20 something days to like form a habit. So the idea is, if you're like practicing like good intentions and like trying to be good and improve yourself in some way, by the end of the month you would have learned something and become a better person. So you implement that the rest of the year, and then next year it comes back again. So it's like a yearly reminder to like re-ground yourself, recenter yourself, um, in that way. Yeah.
very interesting. Okay. Um, so yeah, I mean, you pretty much went over why it's celebrated, the meaning behind it. What about the traditions? And before you get into this, I know like you said, there are 1.8 billion people in the world celebrating this. That spans all sorts of traditions that might be slightly, varying, different variations of it. So if you can actually remind the audience what your background is, and like before you share your traditions, just remind us what your background is, and that way we have an idea of like that those are traditions from that part of the world rather than everywhere. It's because it's
Yeah.
not all the same everywhere. It's a little bit varying, right?
To some extent. So yeah. So I'm my family's Pakistani. I was born and raised in the U.S., but like my dad was born in Pakistan. So I have those traditions and those cultures. So
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of, yeah, the lens by which I can sort of explain our traditions, I guess. So there, to some extent, the general framework or guidelines are pretty standardized, but then like you have
Right.
like variations in the type
Exactly.
of foods and
Yeah.
certain local type traditions, across the world. And even with me, there's some variation in my experiences having grown up in the US versus if I was raised or lived in Pakistan, for example. So I do have some experiences to kind of ask some of my family about what it's like in Pakistan as well, so I can kind of talk
Oh,
about that
cool.
too. But yeah, so you're asking like like sort of the rules, guidelines, right, about
Yeah, traditions, behaviors, rules. Yeah, any of the above.
yeah. So basically, the I mentioned, you have the sari in the morning, you're fasting, and then you have the iftar, right? And so the iftar, one of the traditions is typically you'll open your fast with a date, and that started back again the time of
Like the
of
food date, right? Like
Yes, yes,
Okay.
the food day.
I
Yes,
just want to make
the food
sure.
day.
Multiple variations of the word date.
Yes, yes, exactly, exactly.
Okay.
But yeah, so that's kind of been a tradition for as long as Ramadan has kind of been around. But you open your fast with the date, and then you'll eat some food. So that's where that can vary, I'm sure, based on where you're from. So for us, we'll have some fruits and things. And usually this is when we get like the samosas, the pakoras, all the kind of like that's what I like, is like the more like the fried food and stuff,
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
um
And with
but
spice, as much spice as possible. Pour the hot sauce on it, right?
I know,
I know you.
exactly,
I
exactly.
know you.
And that's where I kind of have to fight for it too, because like a lot of my family nowadays is like, we got to cut back because it's hard to eat all this fried food and stuff after you've been fasting, and I'm like, but that's what I look forward to, so we've had to like compromise on that a little bit. But um yeah, so you have the iftar, and traditionally, that's done with like your family at home, or oftentimes you'll invite people over, go over to people's places, go over to like the mosque, or go to community events. It is a very like community type event as well, and it's good to kind of break your fast with other people, and spend that time together um as a community. So oftentimes, usually in the weekends, we may be over at someone else's house, or we have people over to kind of celebrate with them as well. Um, but we'll break our fast, and then we will pray together, and then after that, it's dinner time. So then it's just your normal meals that you would have, and then rinse and repeat daily for the month. There is one other thing though, is some people do a special prayer called the Tarawih prayer. It's done at the mosque, and that's like every night of the entire month. It can go pretty long. That's not like mandatory, but some people like to do it, especially in countries that are predominantly like Muslim. That is done a lot more often. I've gone a couple times, but it's not something that I usually regularly go for. But that's one of the other traditions. Um, so usually like the mosques and stuff are pretty filled
Yep.
with people in the evenings as well. But,
Yep. 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 Have to ask about the food. What are Hassan's favorite foods during Ramadan time besides samosas and fried foods?
um, that's the good
That's
stuff.
that. Okay.
Yeah, a lot of the dinners, yeah, it's not anything specific. It's your traditional, usually it's our traditional Pakistani food that we'll have, various um biryani, or various chicken dishes, or like just the traditional stuff. But sometimes we'll like just order out or pick up food from somewhere. So um but we don't traditionally have samosas very frequently.
Uh-huh.
That's more like you go to a party or something, or like a special occasion. So that's where it's kind of fun to have like samosas, more often, I guess, during Ramadan.
Gotcha. Okay. All right. Cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Um, I know we discussed when we were discussing, you and I were discussing just Ramadan in general previously. One of the important things that came up was charity and giving back in some way, right? Could you talk a little bit more about that? And uh, yeah, and
Yeah.
how do you like, what do you do maybe? What does your family do to contribute or anything like that?
Yeah. So that's one of the things about this month is the whole reason as well. One of the big reasons why we fast is to like also remind ourselves of the things that we have that and maybe other people don't have. So by not eating and drinking throughout the day, you kind of get somewhat of a sense of feeling for those that may not be as fortunate and be able to have food and drink as readily available. So that's why throughout the month it's encouraged to you know either help out the community or go donate in some way to different causes, and really try and put others before yourself throughout the month. So the one like sort of mandatory piece is you're supposed to give a little bit of charity at some point during the month uh, before the Eid celebration at the end, and it's equivalent to like one meal, so like $10 or that sort of thing. But you take that to 1.8 billion people giving even that much. As long as you can afford, a meal, then you would be obligated to give that amount as well. And so that's the obligatory amount. Then beyond that, it's whatever each person or family wants to do separately from that. So each year it kind of varies for what I do. Just kind of look at different causes out there, different ways that I can help of folks that might need food and supplies. Usually I'll kind of look for things in other countries that I can send some money that way. But that's kind of the general.
What are without going into like too much detail, what are some of the causes you do care about? If you want to share. If you don't want to, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I have any specific ones. I mean, usually there's a lot of times, like I'll go to like my mosque's website and they'll actually have a lot of links right there to kind of donate around the world, and oftentimes they'll coordinate and send funds to different locations as well. So usually that's kind of the route that I'll
and
go
I
through.
think
But
churches do something similar, temples do something similar as well. So yeah, I understand.
Yeah, exactly. So I tend to focus on, at least for this month, getting like food, supplies, shelter, like that type of charity and relief is what I focus on.
And as far as the food part goes, I know we're focusing on Ramadan, but I just thought I'd throw this out there real quick. So I grew up in a Hindu family, like I mentioned before, but there's something sometimes, like when you have a prayer or something like that, there's something that they also do sometimes. Is like they'll feed, at least in India we used to do it. They'll feed people who can't afford food, or regardless of who it is. Usually it was in poorer communities, but nowadays it's like whoever wants to eat can eat. I think it's called a langar, and I'm not sure of all the traditions and meanings and stuff behind it, but I remember I grew up seeing that as well. So that's part of like giving to others as well. So I think some aspect of that is common amongst most of the large religions in the world that I know of. But
it's all organized in different ways, whether it's certain days of the year they especially focus on it or not, but that is definitely a common thread amongst folks for sure.
Okay, very interesting. Now let's see, what are some things that I know there's a lot of rules and a lot of things that you have to do during Ramadan, but what are some things that you can't do? And also, can you help us understand? I know for men versus women, there might be different exceptions. Just kind of let's dig into that a little bit, and what are your thoughts on that?
So in general, throughout the month, again, it's no food, water, sunrise, sunset, but then also trying to abstain from other tend to not go to big parties, concerts, that type of thing. So
but that applies to both men and women, right? Like to everyone.
Yeah. So,
right?
so that's to everyone. Right. I think the folks that the general rules apply to are so children are exempt. So until you're a certain age, you don't have to fast. So obviously you're not taking like a 2-year-old, and but basically the way that it works is generally around like when you kind of hit puberty is sort of when you're expected to start following the rules and traditions. Now the other exception is, the other flip side is the elderly or if you're really sick, then you don't have to fast, especially for those that might really need to take, because you can't ingest anything into your body, so that includes like medications, for example. So if you have to, take medicine or something, or
like on a
whether if you're
schedule
sick
or something like that. Yeah.
or if on a schedule, exactly, then you would be exempt from that. Now if like, for example, like myself, like I get sick and I need to drink water or something or take medicine, then usually what you'll do is, let's say I'm sick for 2 days, right? Then after the month is over, you have the Eid celebration, which we'll talk about. But then after that, you'll make up those 2 days that you missed. So unless you're, elderly and you can't, fast, that's a different story. But if in general you can fast, but you can't if you're, for a specific reason, like you're sick, then you just make that up afterwards. So I've had to do that a few times.
Gotcha. And is fasting, okay, is it a, how do I say this? Is it a choice? Like, I mean, I guess there's, there are Muslims who probably fast, and then there are probably Muslims who don't fast, right? And then
yeah. I mean, it's one of those things of like if you're Muslim, there's like 5 main pillars of your faith, and one of them is the fasting piece. So I mean, it's like, it's how religious are you or not is kind of, that's more that question. But yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And
then the other, sorry, just to answer the other part of your question as well. So, the other exceptions then also come into, like with men and women, for the most part, it's pretty much the same in terms of kind of, when you're expected to start fasting, and then the general rules as well pretty much apply. The only other exception then that comes into play with women, for example, is like, let's say, you're on your period or something, or let's say if you're like a breastfeeding mother, and obviously you need some nutrients to give to your child, that sort of thing. So there's some exceptions that come to that, and then in some cases you would make that up later, or usually what's done, if for example you can't, like if you're breastfeeding, you can't fast for the entire month, then what you do is you just, in general, you take the equivalent of the meals throughout the day that you would have fasted for, whatever that cost would be, let's say $10 a meal, and you would try and donate that at the end of the month as well, kind of the equivalent of what you would have fasted. So that's,
okay, that's cool. Let's see. How I mean, you've covered some of this, but like, how is it celebrated in terms of I mean, not traditions, but because we covered that already, but more so like okay, I like, I'm not trying to compare, this to that or whatever, but like for Christmas, for example, they like light up everything, they put up trees, they exchange gifts and stuff like that. For Diwali, they like light up firecrackers in the streets, and nobody can breathe after that apparently because there's so much air pollution. Stuff like that. Like, what do Muslims do for Ramadan, and obviously for Eid, because Eid is the end of Ramadan, right?
Yeah, so after the last day of Ramadan, then the next day is Eid. Specifically, Eid al-Fitr is what it's called, because there's 2 Eids that we have. But
there's big Eid and little Eid, right?
Yeah, pretty much. This is the big Eid. Eid al-Fitr is really considered the big Eid.
And then there's Eid al-Adha?
Yes.
Did I say that right? Okay. I learned a few things in Albania. Anyway.
Yeah. So yeah, that is really our big celebration after the month is over. And so that so the way that it goes is usually that day in the morning you'll go for a special prayer. And then after that, it's really just celebrate and have fun, so usually everybody will get together with family, eat good food, feast. Everybody will dress up, in like real nice, traditional clothes, and you want to like look good and kind of just celebrate the this special occasion, get together with family. And this is really like we like to call this, like, this is our Christmas in that sense of,
Right.
like, as everybody, a lot of folks look forward to Christmas, they get the toys, the gifts, right? Like that's really what Eid is for us as well.
Right.
So a lot of exchanging gifts and just kind of just celebrating and being with family. So growing up, like, um it was always tricky too, because it is based on the lunar calendar. So sometimes you wouldn't know until closer, like exactly when Eid was, like when does the month end or not. And so sometimes, since we traditionally would have to like take off from school, it was like a matter of, well, I think we're gonna have to take off on Monday, but it might be Tuesday or not. And then you eventually kind of find out. And then you take off. Although now I recently heard, at least in our local county, they actually are giving that as a holiday for all students, Eid, which is really cool to see. And I hope that I think there's a big push, or talk for various holidays to do that across the country, which is cool. But
Yeah, both Fairfax and Loudoun counties have large like population, and even like Montgomery County, DC, they all have large population of like like people from parts of the world that celebrate Ramadan. So, and I think last thing I just want to mention, I'm sorry I interrupted you, but
no.
I overheard rumors that, the government, people want the government to consider actually making Eid and as well as Diwali into federal holidays, but I don't know if that's going to happen or not, but
Yeah,
heard that anyway.
that would be really cool.
Yeah.
So hopefully it does, but at least slowly these various holidays are starting to become recognized more and more,
Yeah.
at least in various local areas, which is cool. But yeah, so we'll take off, and I remember as kids, it was we're telling our parents what we want for Eid, just like you would tell people what you want for Christmas, that sort of thing, right? And you get super excited to open your gifts. And as we've gotten older, now, like this year, we're actually doing, we called it Secret Eid, just like Secret Santa. So Eid is traditionally like what you would say is your gifts on Eid.
Uh-huh. Is there like, okay, for Eid, is this is gonna sound so dumb, like Santa is like a symbol of Christmas. Is there is there anything like that in Eid, or no, not really?
No, nothing,
Okay,
nothing specific like that.
sorry, I know that's like a
No, I
stupid
mean that's
question to ask, but
that's a perfectly valid question. But yeah, I mean, really, like, people will put up like lights and stuff and kind of just dress up, but there's not like a specific, like if you were to like put up some imagery around like Eid or something, it's really just like when we search Ramadan, for example, you're getting with the images you see here of stars and moons and things, but there's no like specific, other symbol or imagery, I guess, that goes with it. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of what the celebration is like. And I did ask my parents, actually. I don't know if we want to talk about this
I want to hear it. Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, I was kind of just getting a sense of like what what it's like in Pakistan as well. So the difference being, obviously, here you have a variety of people from different faiths and stuff, right? Whereas in Pakistan, it's predominantly Muslim. So really, a lot of the people, the shops, the offices, all the locations there all kind of follow the guidelines. So really, during the month of Ramadan, you'll actually have a lot of the schools, offices, and things. Really, they kind of change their hours as well too, to even adjust to the schedule. Some restaurants will close completely during the day.
And then at nighttime, it's like party time.
Yeah, I mean, at nighttime they go pretty late.
Yeah.
And so what I was told is like, when you open your fast, right? So you'll have the iftar, and oftentimes people will have iftar out in the streets, out in the community, and share food and have food for free for folks as well. Here it's like if you go to a mosque you'll get free food, right? But there it's like you go around, everybody's kind of sharing, very community feel again, but it's integrated into the society there. So that's definitely pretty memorable. And then of course, when Eid comes around, I mean it's a much bigger affair. Of everywhere is decorated and people kind of celebrating. Everything is, schools, all the stuff is shut down. It's a whole big affair there. But that's something that, like, my family just had fond memories of. Even more so there, they would pretty much always be around extended family during the month. It's not just like here, it's usually on a weekend or something we'll make the time, but there it's very integrated. You pretty much rarely ever would open your fast by yourself or anything there, just because you always have people around you to share that with. So yeah.
Nice. Honestly, that sounds really nice. Like that sense of community and sharing, I'm sure, is totally like a different experience than what it is here to a degree. The one thing I wanted to mention in terms of the restaurants, being closed there, I know restaurants here don't close during the day, but I know there are some restaurants. There's one called Kebab Palace that I went to last year, actually. And we, I was hanging out with a couple of friends from university, and it was like close to 11 or midnight. and we go in and we ordered a bunch of food, and there was like this long line. And as soon as we entered, like more and more and more people kept coming. And we were wondering, like, what happened? I remember asking, like, why are there so many people here? And they're like, oh, it's Ramadan. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, so then, that reminded me of that. So it's also observed here to a degree, obviously not in the same way, but like, it seems like, people of the Muslim faith do want to go out at night, once they're able to eat, to be able to participate in that. In some cases, at least.
And I'll say, I generally don't like going or getting food from like Desi restaurants around that time, because it gets so busy, or things can like you have to order like way ahead of time, so it gets packed. We actually had to go somewhere the other night. We were invited over to Mahin's family's house for an iftar, and we had to pick up some food from this place, and we called ahead a few hours ahead. And I got there and I was waiting in a line for like 45 minutes before I even got to the counter. And then the same guy was taking orders and also making the food. And then I called ahead and he's like, I'm sorry. Like, he basically, calling ahead basically meant nothing. So he's like, all right, it's going to be another half hour. And I'm like, it's almost iftar time. We got somewhere to be. So I ended up just kind of canceling it. And we had to just make alternate plans or whatever. But things get super, super busy.
You would think they would have extra staff for that, but
yeah, I mean, well, this place, I've been there once before, and I had just as a similar experience when it wasn't Ramadan. So I think it's more this place as well. But but in general, I mean, it gets pretty busy. A lot of people go out and
it does
and celebrate. But yeah,
very cool. Let's kind of move away from food for a bit, right? Like food and that kind of stuff. And let's hear more about your experience. So when did you start participating in Ramadan? And do you have any like early memories, or what's your earliest memory of that? What was it?
So
like, give us like your full like childlike wonder mode of like how you viewed it, growing up, and I don't know, what you look forward to and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, so it was December 23rd, 2000. I'm not even joking. It's actually so funny story. Yesterday, I was actually over at my grandparents' house. My uncle was over and stuff too, and we decided to go and look through the home videos that I have that I've converted digitally. And one of the ones I had was actually my first time fasting, and it had a date on it. So I actually know December 23rd, 2000 apparently was the first day that I fasted. So I was almost 11 years old.
You were 10 years old.
Yeah. And so we actually at the time there's a community center that we like rented out. So it was like we had like all my family, cousins, family friends. So it was like a whole big thing. I actually thought about even taking some footage and maybe even sharing it, but unfortunately for the video purposes, it was just like a lot of people sitting at a table talking, and then we're all eating and done. Like there wasn't actually any like special thing that I could really show.
Dude, that sounds so Desi. Like that sounds so Desi.
That was all that was recorded. So otherwise I would have tried to show something. If I could have shown me like eating the date or something, when I open my whatever it is, that wasn't recorded. But it was cool to see like all those people and how many years ago that was, and it's
and get images of random people eating on camera and like making weird faces while they eat, and like that's anyway. Sorry.
Yeah.
I get
no. But yeah, I mean, I was there. I was like kind of more running around with like my cousins and stuff, and just kind of enjoying. And so usually what will happen is folks will, the first time they do it, maybe practice like a half day or whatever, right? So then this was, I think, my first full day that I fasted. And so sometimes you'll do like one full day in a month, right? Then the next year you might fast the weekends or something. And then the next year, every other day. And then the next year, you kind of like, different people kind of ease into it in different ways. And that's kind of how we've done it. I think at the time, the memory that I have is like, you see everyone around you fasting and doing it, and you feel like, yeah, I can do that too. I want to try it. I want to do it. And you kind of, it's fun to like sit down with your, family at the end of the day, everybody's all together. Cause honestly, when it's not Ramadan, a lot of times we're all eating separately when we can, even people in the same house. It just, everybody just has their own schedules, their own timelines on things. So it's nice to kind of get together with everyone and eat. So I remember just, kind of being excited about that. And I would always be excited about Eid and the gifts and stuff. Right.
I'm sure.
I always had my wish list of things that I would want.
Power Rangers.
yeah
Probably,
for sure.
right?
I'm sure many of the Power Rangers things I had were Eid gifts.
I knew it.
And I again because the time changes every year too, right? So I remember back when I was younger, Eid being in the winter time. And even one year I remember Eid was actually either right the day before or the day after my birthday. So it kind of had like a double celebration. I actually got the Nintendo DS for that.
DDS.
I do remember that, but
actually I was gonna I don't mean to interrupt you, but I was gonna ask about that, so I'm glad you brought it up, because me as somebody who doesn't know as much about Ramadan and Eid, I noticed actually, I know we've been friends for like more than 10 years now, right? But I, for some reason, forgot that Eid is at a different time of the year, because like the past couple of years you've been fasting right around like the spring summertime. So I in my head I started thinking, oh, it's always in the spring summer. And then you mentioned your earliest memory being in December. I'm like, oh yeah, 9th month of the lunar calendar. Lunar calendar and the solar calendar, they don't match up the same way. So yeah, that makes sense. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, it's roughly about 2 weeks ish earlier every year. So different sets of challenges depending on the part of the year it is, but that's kind of the memory I had of when I was younger. It was kind of winter time. And then I also do remember even some of the you get challenged sometimes in going through it as you get older, and sometimes you wonder like, are other people going to understand or be able to accommodate? Because especially when you're not around family, if you have to travel for something, let's say school related, you have a time of when you're supposed to like open your fast and this and that. And and sometimes I'd have to like try and coordinate with stuff. So for example, like when I was in band in high school, we would go on either concerts or competitions for things like with marching band. And I remember like we'd have full on days out in the summer heat, doing marching band practice, and I'm fasting. And then we'd go to a competition, and I'd be like timing it of like, okay, wait, right after this competition ends is about when it's, sunset. And I'd have to like, coordinate with some of the teachers that are with us or whatever, and try and make sure that I, had food or something, or at least a date and some water or something that I could open my fast with. So it's something that oftentimes, other people didn't really know about it, I guess, or know what types of accommodations to try and make to help with that. So that was always something that growing up I also had to try and navigate a little bit, just to make sure, I could still continue to fast, and even when I'm not around, my family, if I'm traveling, that sort of thing. So it was always interesting, but made it work.
Yeah. Super cool.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I know you already shared some of your parents' experiences and as to like how Eid and Ramadan are celebrated in Pakistan. Were there any other stories that you had, or do you think you've shared everything? I just want to make sure, because I have that on my list of questions. So.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think we had any other specifics. I think I mean, especially like in Pakistan, a lot of folks live with not just their parents, but grandparents, some aunts and uncles, right? It's usually an extended family and stuff. So even within the household, you're really with family, but more so throughout the month, spending time with them. So I think that's just some of the memories that like my family had is just being with everyone, and also just taking the time to like refocus throughout the year, because I do think it is a good reminder, as we get caught up in a lot of things. So this month is always something that folks look forward to kind of reground themselves as well.
I know, just something that I just thought of, in the Catholic religion, they have Lent where they give up something, or again, I'm not, whoever's watching, don't get offended because I don't know too much about Lent, but I know many people give up something, right? Like some people will give up technology, other people will give up this or that, or
it's similar type of concept, right? I mean, I think that's I think we're all a lot more similar than I think we realize in many of our traditions and ways.
I couldn't agree more.
It's just expressed in different ways. But
it's understood in different ways too. I think not to like be sound all preachy or whatever, but I think now more than ever we need to recognize that as humanity, sometimes we end up focusing so much on differences, and end up believing in whatever it is that we're believing in, in terms of differences. But really, like in the Hindu tradition, my mom actually she observes this tradition called Navratri, which is like also based on the lunar calendar. And my mom, my sister, and even my dad, sometimes they fast. And this time around, actually almost every time around, because it's based on the lunar calendar, it's right around the same time as Ramadan. And I don't know, it's just, you can appreciate the way you do it and the way we do it. It may be different, but you can really see that there are commonalities, and you can really bring that all together and appreciate that there's much more in common than we recognize, because we never have conversations about these things. So how are we supposed to recognize it?
That's important, right? Like that's, we all have similar intentions in that. I think like bringing awareness, I think, is the first step, because not a lot of people know about the many traditions that people have around the world, and once that awareness is there, the conversation happens, and then you realize, oh yeah, like we do this kind of thing too, and it really brings people together for sure.
Hopefully, it's
hopefully that's the idea, at least,
That's the idea, exactly. So I think besides that, I mean, are there any final closing thoughts? And I think today we're like right under an hour, but I have a few other notes here, but I think you covered much of that, throughout your talk or throughout the podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I hopefully, again, I'm speaking from one perspective of the Pakistani background and having been born and raised in the U.S., so I can't speak to everybody's traditions and cultures. So I'd love to hear, what other people may have experienced as well. But hopefully that helped to shed some light on what Ramadan Eid is. So I'd say to kind of wrap things up, one takeaway from this really is, in the spirit of Ramadan and Eid, I just in the spirit of bringing everybody together again, I would just encourage everyone to, just go out and spread good vibes, help other people that are in need in whatever way that you want or can. Let's just look out for each other, support each other, and I think if that can be one takeaway from this month that we all do, I think we'll all be that much better for it.
Yeah, and I will add on to that and just say there are plenty of people right now that need help. There's plenty going on in the world where you can contribute, even in small ways, whether it's in your community or whether it's the world at large. So just gonna throw that in there. There's a lot that's happened in the past couple of years, as we all know. So
yeah,
couldn't agree with you more, man. Thank you for that positive encouragement.
Absolutely, and thank you for all the questions and the discussion tonight with this episode. Thank you to everybody that may listen to this as well. Share your thoughts, please, with us via any in the comments or via social media. We'd love to hear from you. So our social media links, we're on Twitter at the Dose of Desi. And then you can also email us at the Dose of Desi pod at gmail.com.
That's right. So I guess let's wrap things up. Again, we're probably going to put out an episode notification on our Twitter, and as well as polls out there. I think the last episode we had a poll, right?
We did for the last one. Yeah.
So we do things like that every once in a while, and we'd love it if you would pitch in. I think we're working on lining up some more guests coming up, in the next few episodes. So we look forward to seeing you there. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and Ramadan Mubarak. So
Ramadan Mubarak. Take care.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.